Hey everybody, and thank you for joining us for 5 minutes in the Word. You know, Mr. Gary, last time we were talking about the children of Israel. They have left Egypt. They have now made their way to Sinai. Now, Sinai, it's a special place for the children of Israel. And in fact, God had told Moses. He had told Moses that, you know, this is going to be a sign. This is going to be a proof that here we are, that you're going to come back to this place and you're going to worship me. Now, he has some people with him. But tell us a little bit about that. Why is Sinai so important? What happens here?
Okay, Sinai is where they received the law. And there's a lot of confusion among people about the law. Let's look together at first Exodus chapter 19. And particularly I want to pick up at verse 3 because God begins to give his directions there. And here's what he says. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. So this covenant clearly is a covenant with the children of Israel.
Right.
It doesn't say it's a covenant with all you Gentile folk out there. It's just the children of Israel. A lot of confusion about that. If you go over to the book of Romans, we'll actually see the Apostle Paul talking about that very fact as he writes to that church that he so desperately wants to go and visit with. In chapter 3 of Romans, beginning in the very, very first verse, we'll notice what he has to say to the church at Rome. What advantage then has the Jew, or what is the profit of circumcision? Much in every way, chiefly because to them were committed the oracles of God. So notice again, to the Jews were committed the oracles of God. In fact, if you back up just a little bit, in the same book, Romans chapter 2, this time, verse 14, Paul says, for when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves. So Paul says Gentiles don't have the law. Jews have the law, Gentiles don't have the law. Now, if you turn over to Galatians chapter 3, the apostle comes back to it again. And as he comes back to it, listen to what he has to say. I assume I should thank you for that. Verse 19 of Galatians chapter 3. Listen to what it says. What purpose then does the law serve? It was added because of the transgressions till the seed should come, to whom the promise was made. And it was appointed through angels by the hands of a mediator. So, the law was never meant to be permanent.
Right.
God had a plan. And the plan was this law is put in place until the seed, and of course Paul identifies the seed, that's Christ. We talked about that days ago in our study of Genesis. In verse 24 of that same Galatians 3, because of that he goes on to say, the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. A tutor was a slave. He could bring the children to instruction, but really that was his only job. He didn't get to stay there. He didn't get to inherit because he had done that. No. The children are the heirs, not the slave. Well, the law of Moses is not the heir of the great promise of God. Instead, the law of Moses gets us to the promise of God in Jesus Christ. Now, Jeremiah chapter 31 clearly says that God told him that I'm going to give you a new covenant. And it's going to be different than this old covenant. The old covenant was written on tables of stone, but the new covenant is going to be written on the heart. In the old covenant, you were born into it as a baby. And so the babies had to be taught. They had to be taught what God wanted,
right,
and what the covenant was. But in the new covenant, God told Jeremiah, he said, in the new covenant, it's going to be different. And what's going to make it different is quite simple. When you get into this covenant, you've already been taught about God. And so when Jesus says in John chapter 3, you must be born again, all of a sudden we get the idea. You're born into this new covenant through baptism, and that birth places you not under the covenant with the children of Israel under the law of Moses, but with a new covenant, the new covenant being the covenant with Jesus Christ. It's a beautiful idea, and what a wonderful thought to realize God is working a plan out over time. We'll see a little bit more of that plan in our next time together.